Hi, welcome to Mental Health and Business. I'm very pleased that we have with us tonight Julia Toothacre, who's an established and effective career coach and strategist. She'll be telling us all about how she helps people with their content and introduces them to the marketplace. Julia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
The first thing that I have to ask about is Utah, because it's such an interesting, crazy sounding place. And you see on your website, I am not a Mormon. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's good. What? How did you end up in Utah?
Okay, this is a long story, but I'll try to give you the shortest version. So, I'm originally from Southern California. I spent the majority of my life there. We moved to Utah in 2019 because I had some pretty big life events happen back to back. So, I lost my dad, I had my son, and then I lost my mom all in about an 18
Oh,
months span. And I'm also an only child. If you're an only child, then you understand losing both your parents
uh,
very close together, whom you have good relationship with. It was a very trying time. So it kind of took me into a who am I? What am I doing in the world? And now I have this tiny human, and how am I going to be there for him? And what are we doing here? And so a lot of big life questions. And my husband and I actually both did some visioning work with a good friend of ours, also a coach. And it led us to the life that we were living was not the life we wanted to live.
mm,
And so we started really exploring what that looked like and the opportunities that we had and all of that. And my best friend actually had moved to Utah. So we
oh,
came out here to visit. It was not on my radar at all, but we came out here a couple of times and we just fell in love with it. For anybody that has been to Utah, is absolutely beautiful place to
yeah,
live,
it's notable.
absolutely magical. But to connect, the coaching to actual implementation within your life, my husband had said, I want to wake up and I want to see water and mountains. He's from San Diego. And I was like, well, we're not getting that in California because that's expensive. So when we were looking for different places to live, Utah had a community that has a lake, and the house that we found was overlooking this like man-made lake that they have with the Wasatch Mountains in the
Oh,
background
cool.
as well. And so when we found this house, we knew immediately that this was where we were meant to be because we had articulated this vision of what we were looking for. So it allowed us to know almost immediately what we wanted. So that's how we ended up in Utah. That's our little story.
Well, that's wonderful because it reminds me of exactly how you describe your work. You ask people
Mhm.
what it is that they want, and then you help them articulate their dreams, and then you help them affect your dreams. So there's a narrative through line there that I really like.
Yes, yes. And it's one of those stories where even though I've been a career coach for a very long time, this is a new story to my career that I haven't used, and clients previous to that got a different version of me
Hmm.
because of the life events that I had previous to that. And so it's interesting how life provides opportunities for you and then changes kind of how you do things and how you've been doing things just based on your own story and what you put out into the world.
Hmm. Yes, and I'm I'm moved by your story of loss, and I have a very similar story. I'm an only child myself, and I lost one parent when I was 12, 13, and another when I was in
Oh.
my early 30s, and a bunch of losses. Um, this is a snobby metaphor, but the house of Atreus is an ancient Greek house where it's known for death and destruction and mayhem. And whenever people ask me about my background, I say, "Do you know about the House of Atreus?" Which I will not get into here, but I certainly sympathize. And yeah, out of profound loss, often comes growth, and
Mhm.
it comes more easily if you're well mentored or coached. And you clearly are all of those things. Could you tell our audience just a bit about what you do and what you enjoy doing most about what you do?
Yes. So I'm a career coach and I have been doing that. I think at the time of this recording, we're at the 13-year mark, I believe.
Oh,
And I got my start in higher education. And so I worked primarily with college students, but I also worked with everybody, alumni, encore career, all of that. And it really gave me a broad look at the world of work because you work with so many people with different interests and personalities and backgrounds. And it really prepared me well for now being on my own and having my business because I have this broad view of work. And I've worked with so many recruiters and so many hiring managers from all industries and all
mhm,
different types of functions that one of the things that I love doing the most is helping people figure out who they are in the season that they are in.
mm,
And so I do a lot of self exploration and really solidification of who people are, who they've been, who they want to be, and are they in the right place right now? And I'll harken back to the story that I just told. You know, I had a lot happen in an 18-month period, but I will tell you that it woke me up and I didn't even know that I needed to be woken up. And so that experience really fueled me wanting to start my own business
mm,
to help people who have been in a similar or are in a similar situation where something has happened, whether that's a life event or they just feel stagnant in their career. They know that something needs to change and they need help figuring that out and working through all of that. And so that's really what I enjoy the most about the work that I do.
um, is there a person or a type of problem that you find engaging, and the opposite as well? You find less least engaging?
That's a good question. So I would say I work best with ambitious professionals, people who would probably be classified as high achievers or high performing. And part of that is because that's who I am. And so it's just a type of person that in all my years of working with people from, all backgrounds and personality types, those were the professionals that really I could impact the best because we just understood each other. We understand the language, we understand the internal motivations, but I also understand the struggles that high achievers have in the workplace and then also just personally in terms of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, all those
Mm,
things. And so I really enjoy working through that. That's also a group of people that's really prone to burnout, which is also something that I experienced as well. And so I like helping people work through those symptoms and making them realize it's not their fault, you know, and helping them figure out how can they move forward, whether that's in their position or finding a new position if it's a toxic environment. So I feel like that's who I work best with. Um, in terms of, I would say, a more challenging client for me is someone that just doesn't want to do the work. I think that's really what it comes down to for me. Because of my background, I can work with a variety of people as long as they have the motivation to move forward. And so when somebody contacts me, but they want me to do all the work for them, that's not going to be a good fit. And there are other career coaches that will do all the work, right? They will write the resume, they will essentially apply to positions for you. I don't do that. I'm really on kind of the front end of the
mm.
who are you, what do you want, all of that. Most of my clients, they know how to write a resume, they know how to interview. They're trying to figure themselves out. And so I focus mainly on that piece of it.
In terms of I'm a psychologist, as you know, and I treat a lot of people who are in that category. Not all of those people in that category are healthy, right? Some
Very
people
true.
use type A tendencies to mask all kinds of deficiencies, real and imagined. What do you do in those cases?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I will say, as a career coach, I'm not a therapist. And I draw a very clear line on that for my clients. So if I start to see something or hear something in terms of behavior, or something else, some kind of addiction or something like that, I will address it and refer them to seek additional help if they haven't already.
Mm-hmm.
I have some clients that have ADHD, and they are seeing, they are seeing a therapist and working through what that looks like for them. And they share that with me so that I understand context of how they work and move through the world.
Yeah.
And so that's very helpful for me as
Mm.
a career coach, because my approach is going to be very different for them. But I am someone, and I try to educate people and career coaches on this, that we are not therapists, and there is a very fine line of what we provide, unless you happen to be a therapist that does career coaching. Those do exist. um, there is a fine line. And so when you are looking for a career coach, you want to make sure that they understand what their limitations are, because we do deal with sensitive information. People do share a lot of personal information with me, that if you don't have a good understanding of coaching and some type of counseling, you can very well manipulate someone unintentionally because of what they have been through in their life. And so you have to have a level of awareness as a coach to be able to work with people who have other things going on and refer them well.
Yeah, no, that sounds very smart and very sensitive. You know, also, just to ask this question in a slightly different way, how about those people who are not telegraphing any particular mental illness, but whose ambition is masking other things? For example, I have people who are miserable and extremely successful, and their problem could be defined as being too eager to succeed. Right? It's a kind of success
Yeah.
in an apsychological framework. The work. I mean, I don't like the I don't like the suffix aholic. I think we make too much of that, but they'd be called workaholics. I mean, they'd be, and they are very high performing and all the rest of it. But the high performance is a symptom of something much darker. Do you ever see that?
I feel like I went through that, honestly. I do. And I think when somebody makes the choice to go to therapy or to hire a coach, to hire somebody that they know is going to uncover things about them, I think that's the point where they know that something is off. They know that something is wrong. I think the clients that I tend to get, are probably more self-aware than they even realize. And so they know it's a problem,
Mm.
and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I change? How do we adjust to this? Do I need to change careers? Is it me? Do I need to change my mindset, my behaviors, my habits, whatever it is? And so, yes, if I see that, then we will dig into it.
Mm-hmm.
And usually one of the first things I will do, I do this with every client, is a values exercise, because that values exercise is a really good snapshot of what's most important to them at that moment.
Tell me what that is. What's a value exercise?
Yeah, so it's a free PDF on my website that I
I'll go get it.
that I have all my clients go through it, and it essentially breaks up, values into a couple different categories, because I think that's helpful for people to visualize. But you're looking for your top 10 values, the things that you really want and need in this season. And I really emphasize that your values will shift and change as you shift and change, or things happen to you. And so you want to be constantly reevaluating that. And so I get them to choose their 10, and I usually get them to identify what I call as deal breaker values. So the things that they have to have in their life or career. And then we talk about that in accordance to what's happening in their life and career in that moment. And so a lot of times what you're talking about, it'll allow me to uncover that
Mm-hmm.
and figure out what's really going on.
Oh, that sounds so smart. There should be more of you out there, clearly. Um,
Thanks.
I have so many questions for you. I want to talk about personality assessment, but also strategist. That's a word that's used almost ubiquitously now. What does that mean in your lexicon? What does that
Yeah.
mean, strategist?
That's a great question because a lot of times you hear career coach, but you don't hear career strategist. And I had to add the coach in there because people don't search the term career strategist. It's not very well known. The way that I see it for me, I am inherently a strategist. And so I look at whatever the situation is, and I'm very good at making connections and then building a plan to help somebody execute. And so I take that and I apply it to somebody's career or their situation, whatever the situation is. And so for a common client, they come to me with whatever the problem is. I learn about them. I learn about the situation. I ask really good questions and get them to articulate as much as possible. And then we make connections. We dig deep, right, to figure out what some of these threads are. And then we build a plan and we look at here's the goal for right now. And then here's the plan based on what you have told me. I think a lot of career coaches are very good at what I would call tactile career services, which is they write a resume, they help with interviewing, they help with the mechanics of a job search. But to actually look at somebody and look at them as a whole person, their life, their personality, their career path up to this point, and then their aspirations, and help them make those connections if they haven't already, and then build a plan based on who they are at their core. I don't see that as often. And that is the thing that I bring to the table with my clients and why I call myself a strategist.
That's great. That's very clear. And I noticed that the word marketing hasn't been used here. Are you against the word marketing?
No. No, you mean with my for my
Yeah,
clients
yeah.
or yeah, I mean, I think most of my clients honestly don't need as much help on the marketing of themselves.
Hmm.
I think they tend to have really well-established networks because I work mostly with people in their mid-career.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I help them harness what they already have. And if there is a gap, we'll talk about that. But for the most part, I think my clients know themselves better than they think that they do. They just need somebody to help kind of corral them to go the right way with the right plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That sounds great. What person? I mean, as someone who had to 1,700 personality assessments to get through graduate school, what personality assessments do you use?
I feel like you might judge me for this
Oh,
one,
I'm
but
ready.
I'm okay. So my primary assessment that I love and have been trained in is MBTI Step 2. And so Myers-Briggs, and I've talked to many a psychologist that are like, this is a garbage assessment. I've heard all of it. But I use Step 2, which is a little bit different. So Step 2 takes each of the dichotomies of MBTI and breaks them down into facets.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I love about this assessment is I will get clients that will say, well, I can't, I assessed as an extrovert, but I feel like I could be an introvert. Why is that happening? And when you take the basic assessment, you don't necessarily get that information. When you take Step 2, it actually breaks down introversion and extroversion into facets. So you might assess as an extrovert, but you have a couple facets that go over onto the introvert side.
Mm-hmm.
And so it explains some of those tendencies of why you might think, I think maybe I'm an introvert. I don't really know. And so I love that assessment for the career side. It gives my clients some really great language and a starting point. And for any assessment that I use, one of the things that I tell people is this is a starting point. This is not the be all end all of who you are. It's just giving us a window into who you are and giving you some language that you might not have had before to help describe who you are.
Um, I have some patients I did not like testing myself. I hated score. I didn't, I sort of liked giving the tests. I hated scoring them. And I really enjoyed the data. We had to do 16 batteries, and they were multi-instrument batteries. So we had to do projective tests, we had to do IQ tests, we had to do MMPI, we had to do this one, that one, this one, that one. And what was fascinating for all of us, I think, is just to see how all of this data, if you can not not look at any one piece of it as
Mhm.
being in any way authoritative, but what does the story tell once you put it all together, and how do you actually write those reports? Which I
Mhm.
also hated doing because they were so time consuming. But they were extremely. I mean, from an intellectual standpoint, they were extremely helpful.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things that, and I think I had a pretty good testing education. One of the things that was drilled into us was that um, unless the person is particularly neurologically impaired or has some kind of massive deficit, all of this is sort of fluid.
Mhm.
It's not static.
Mhm.
And I have a number of patients who come in periodically, and they want to convince me that they're an introvert or an extrovert. It doesn't really matter. They want to convince me that they're a static property. This
Right.
is who I, it's like Popeye. I
Right.
am what I am. What I am.
Mhm.
And that's really dangerous. That's obviously not what you're doing. But I think I'm not saying anything you don't already know, I'm sure. But one of the downsides of testing, right, is that people hold on to it, like bloody death. Like, this is who I
Mhm.
am. And the good side is that they feel grounded. The bad side is they feel grounded because they're actually going to be changing, right? One
Right,
way or the other.
right. Yeah, and when I give step 2, that is something that I talk about is you have both sides in you. It's not like you are this and you will never be this. You have both. It's just which are you preferencing? Which are you going to go to first? Right? It doesn't mean, a lot of people, I used this example with you earlier, a lot of people believe that I'm an extrovert because of how I present and how I show up on video, on podcasts in the world. I'm not. I am the introvertiest introvert. But I understand that for the business that I want, I have to show up a certain way. And when you're on
Mm,
video, if you don't have a certain level of energy, you
right,
can come off very flat. And I realized that very early on. So I
right.
compensate for that. But if you're with me in real life in normal conversation, I'm not I'm not gonna be like this, it's a
No,
little bit different. And I
right.
think that's where context matters,
Yeah,
in terms of when we talk about career, you can be any personality type and pretty much do any career. But are you going to have to reach outside your preferences more often than not?
that's right.
And that's the conversation we have to have when it comes to any type of personality assessment.
Right. In the psychoanalytic world, we talk about self states. Uh,
Mm.
Somewhere around 1950 in the United States, um, there was a shift in thinking about self as a unitary property, like this is who you are, and to you, as the poet says, contain multitudes, and so different contexts will bring out different aspects. It's like the patient who comes in and says that they got drunk last night and took off their clothes and danced naked on the bar, but it wasn't me. I say, well, that's very interesting. Who was that exactly?
Alter ego.
That was you. That may not be the best part of you right now, but yeah. How about longitudinal data? Do you have any sense over time how your clients fare? Uh, how many more reiterations they go through, or do they stay, or is that helpful to you to know? Or
So I currently don't stay with clients long term most of the time. A lot of the work that I do is situational to what
mm,
their career situation is. So a lot of them will come to me when they want to transition or they're considering transition, or if they're in a situation that they don't know how to handle. So more career management. I do have a couple of clients who've been with me for a couple of years, and we kind of ebb and flow
mm,
based on what's going on in their career. But I love staying with clients long term, but it's not very common in the type of coaching that I do. If they do stay with me long term, it's because they're in a position that they don't want to leave, but they're trying to manage as best they can in that situation. And so we do a lot of career management more than career exploration and advancement.
That's great. How do I know if I need to call you? Like, what are the signs that I need to call Julia? I need to put her on the speed dial. I'm just miserable.
So I think the time to call me is when you feel stuck, when you feel complacent, when you feel like you are going through the motions of career and possibly life, and you are ready to do something about it. You know that something needs to change. And it could be that you are just not showing up as your best self. And you know that, and you're maybe not 100% sure what's going on. Maybe you like the work that you're doing, but something feels off or you feel like something's missing. That's the best time to contact me.
Sounds great. That sounds great. What other questions do I have that I haven't asked you? I don't know. Here's a question. If you weren't doing this, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh.
That question, by the way, comes from the Russian dramaturg Stanislavski, who asked his actors to ask that question, which I think is just brilliant. What would we be doing if you weren't doing this?
What would we be doing?
I suppose the answer could be I'd be doing this, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably be in corporate. I would probably be in some kind of learning and development type position. I won't go back to higher ed, so I probably wouldn't do that. My dream when I was a little girl was to be a dolphin trainer. So I feel like,
Dolphin trainer.
you know, that could still be.
Well, I think that's a good metaphor for what you do. You teach us how to jump through hoops and get more fish.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yes. Oh, I'm going to use that. That fits with my business name too, right?
That's great. We train dolphins. That sounds so great. Yeah.
Yeah. I love teaching. I think that's the biggest thing for me is I love coaching and teaching. So it would be something in that realm, even if it wasn't exactly this.
That's great. All right. If people want to get a hold of you, what should they do?
So a couple different ways. My website is a really wonderful resource. So ridethetidecollective.com. I have a lot of free resources, a podcast, as well as different coaching options and courses, but also LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people and I share a lot of wonderful career information over there. So those are the two places that I would recommend getting connected with me.
And you've got a wonderful dog on your website.
I do. That's my mini schnauzer, Sierra. She actually just turned 14, so she's an old lady now, but she has a wonderful spirit. So we hope she'll be with us for many more years.
Wonderful. Well, listen, it's been a real treat, Julia. Thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners were very, very energized by you and by what you do. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really great.
Bye.